This is Mr. Islamius. Our lesson today about the inverse of the linear function. And in this tutorial we'll know how to find this inverse. At the first, what is the meaning of the inverse of the relation? For any relation formed from ordered pair, like -3 and -16, if you need to find the inverse, just change the order, x instead of y and y instead of x. So -3 and -16, the inverse now will be 16 and -3. -1 and 4, the inverse will be 4 and -1. 2 and 14, the inverse will be 14 and 2. 5 and 32, the inverse will be 32 and 5. We just change x instead of y and y instead of x. In this problem, we need to find the inverse of each relation. As we said before, for any ordered pair, if you need to find the inverse, just change the x instead of y and y instead of x. So for the first one, we have the ordered pair 4 and -10. So the inverse will be -10 and 4. 7 and -19. So the inverse will be -19 and 7. -5 and 17. So the inverse will be 17 and -5. -3 and 11. So the inverse will be 11 and -3. Number 2. We need to find the inverse. So we have -6 and 8. So the inverse will be 8 and -6. -15 and 11. So the inverse will be 11 and -15. 9 and 3. So the inverse will be 3 and 9. 0 and 6. So it will be 6 and 0. If you have the table and you need to find the inverse, by the same we'll solve. That's x and that's y. The ordered pair is -4 and -13, so we'll write it as -13 and -4. -1 and -8.5, so it will be -8.5 and -1. 5 and 0.5, so it will be 0.5 and 5. 9 and 6.5, so it will be 6.5 and 9. Now we need to find the inverse for the graph. To find the inverse of the graph, it's easy. Just find 2 points on the line. That is the first point which belongs to the line. This point is 0 and 1. Find another point. We have here -1 and 0. Find the inverse. So it will be 1 and 0. 0 and -1. 1 and 0, so that's the graph of the first point. 0 and -1, so that's the graph of the second point. Then you can draw the line. So to find the inverse of the line, just find 2 points, then find their inverse, then graph the line. Number 2. We need to find the inverse of this graph. So we can find 2 points. That's the first point, and that's the second one. The first point is -4 and 2. -4 and 2, and the second point is 5 and -1, 5 and -1, so we find the inverse, so it will be 2 and -4. The inverse will be -1 and 5. That's -1 and 5. That's 2 and -4. So we can graph the line. Number 3. As we said before, we just find 2 points. That's the first point and that's the second one. The first point is -4 and 0. The second point is 5 and 3. So to find the inverse, it will be 0 and -4. Find the inverse, it will be 3 and 5. The first point is 0 and -4. 3 and 5. Then graph the line. To check the answer, if the answer is right or wrong, draw a line, y equals x. Y equals x, it's represented by a line passing through the origin point, and a is equal to b. X is equal to y. Each point of x is equal to each point of y. So that is the first one. You will find that the two lines make a reflection on each other. The first line is the image of the second line. You can check the answer again for the second one. If you draw y equals x, you will find that the two lines make reflection on each other. Check for the third one. If you draw a line y equals x, you will find that the two lines make reflection. So the graph now is right.